Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So we've only one piece of news. Things have been very slow recently, but this is a pretty notable one. Seeing a little bit of the reaction to this, like people are very upset about this because the news is Patterns in Time has been delayed again. The release date has gone from being November 29th/30th to now being December 20th, but this is the mass market date. So far, it seems like the comic book store date is staying the same. November 30th is a Wednesday, of course. Previews World still says the same. And this is interesting because, obviously, Team Avatar Treasury, I have it. It was out in my local comic book store. It kept its October date, but is still not out mass market until November 15th. This also seems to be happening with the Turf Wars Omnibus, which you can see here, recently was delayed to December 27th, but it still says on, like, say, the Dark Horse website that the comic book store release date for this is November 16th. So this is a weird one where of late it seems like there's been some sort of a weird issue when it comes to the kind of distribution for the mass market, which is different than the distribution for the comic book stores. So comic book stores are keeping their dates, but the mass market date is changing quite heavily. So far, like I said, this seems to only really be affecting three books, which is Team Avatar Treasury, which is out now in comic book stores, November 15th mass market. Turf Wars Omnibus, which is due out obviously November 16th in comic book stores, but is actually December 27th mass market. And then, of course, here, Patterns in Time has been delayed mass market to December 20th, but is apparently keeping its November 30th release date in comic book stores. So just be aware of that. If you want these books as soon as possible, check your local comic book store on the comic book store dates, and that will probably tell us a lot about what is actually happening here. Because, of course, I have read Patterns in Time. I got a review copy of it. I don't have access to the review copy anymore. You only have access to it for like, what was it, like a month or something like that. But that means they've locked in, obviously, the content here. This delay is nothing to do with, like, art not being ready or anything like that. It seems like this is purely on the getting the book printed and shipping side of things. And because the comic book store release dates seem to be staying the same, it probably is more of a sort of shipping issue, if I was to guess. So it's it's really unfortunate because this is the only new content mainline comic release of the year for Dark Horse. Everything else this year has been a reprint book. This is the only thing that they had that is not the free comic book day book, and even that had its own problems in that we only got half of a new free comic there because of whatever happened with the Avatar story, and they replaced it with the preview for the Chibi comic, which itself is another mess of a release that has like a crazy, like, ooh, it's out in January next year. And again, it's kept that date for a while, but who knows if that will actually keep its date. It's really weird what's happening to these books. And again, it does seem to be the case that the major delays only seem to be happening to the new release books. The reprint books seem like they only ever receive a couple of weeks, maybe a month at most, release date change. Otherwise, they stick to it. Whereas, obviously, the Chibi comic was due for release July 2021 and is not out until January 2023. And it's the very end of January as well. Patterns in Time, of course, has been absolutely crazy with the delays. Originally scheduled for April this year, now coming out December, so like 8 months worth of delay. But I think the worst thing with this comic is that it has had literally 10 or 11 different release dates in the relatively short period of time we've known about it, like just about a year. They have not been able to keep track of what's going on with this book, and I don't really understand why. In that, like, sure, you can explain, you know, a lot of it with as being like, say, you know, COVID and shipping stuff. But I think some of the stuff that's happened to these Avatar comics goes well beyond that. And especially when you have examples of other books from a similar time getting very minimal delays, yet a book that's coming out like the following week has been delayed by months and months and gets another release date change. Like, I don't get what's happening. And it's just been a very bad year for Dark Horse, because there's still a month and a half until this date. There's still a couple of weeks until the comic book store release date for this book. There's still time for delays to happen to this book. And imagine this book gets delayed out of this year. Imagine what happens then. I think that just makes Dark Horse look like fools. Like, I think it's a really bad look. Even if there's a good reason for all these delays, it just is a terrible look for Dark Horse. For the one new comic that they had this year to not even come out this year. I think that's just so funny. Even if it is only the mass market date that gets delayed into 2023 and you can actually get it in your local comic book store this year, I still think that's a terrible look overall. That that this book has ended up coming out so close to the end of the year. It's not good. In the Korra anniversary year, it's not a good look, especially when you have at one point promoted this comic on the basis of it's meant to be a part of the Korra 10-year anniversary celebration, which has felt like it basically doesn't exist this year. There's been like no Korra merchandise, and sure, we've got a few like art book reprints, but in general, not a lot happening. And this book and what's happened with it is a real signifier of that. Because the other thing to kind of remember is that they have been terrible, like absolutely terrible, about presenting information on this book. And I'm completely honest, and I think it's completely true when I say this. I have revealed more information about this book than Dark Horse have, without even just like spoiling every single line of dialogue. Me merely revealing what all the stories are in this book is more than Dark Horse have done. Because look at the listing here for this. Like, the mere fact that only a couple of websites have the preview is the only thing that properly tells you that it has reprints for the free comic book day books. Other than that, they don't even have, like, say on this listing, a list of all the creators. I think it's one Dark Horse blog post that even has the list of all the creators. And I'm not even sure it's like fully up to date and accurate, but it might be. Haven't looked at it in a little bit. That's the problem here, is marketing. I posted a post on Twitter, I think it was yesterday, just mentioning that the Chibi comic, it's kind of crazy what's happened to that book. And I had a couple of people be like, hey, I didn't even know this book existed. And I was a bit like shocked, because we've known about that book for so long. But that's part of the problem, is that there was excitement around this book in 2021. And a little bit with the free comic book release date. The free comic book, which had the preview for it. But because it is a chibi book, no one's getting particularly excited about it. And Dark Horse are pretty bad about marketing their book. So I don't blame anyone for not knowing a single thing about the chibi comics. Because it's a 2023 release. And it's still a little ways off. I don't blame anyone at all for that. And I think it's the same with a lot of this. It's just like, people who haven't seen, say, like my early review for Patterns in Time, they would have no clue what's in this book. And I think the lack of that information being made super, super public is not going to help this book when it comes out, I think, because people already are annoyed about the kind of choice of stories in this book and what characters are and are not included, the amount of Korrasami content that is in, or rather isn't in this book, that sort of thing. They should be a little bit clearer about that, and they just, in the grand scheme of things, haven't been. And I don't know why this is the case, and I can only hope that things improve going into next year, where At least they seem to have it planned out. For the first time in years, they're telling us like ahead of time what the books are. Like there's not even solicitations up for Azula in the Spirit Temple or the Mako comic. They're not up on any website yet, but we at least know about them. Obviously, the Azula one we know much more about than the Mako comic, but still, they've told us an idea of the plan for comics going into the future. But the problem is, the Azula comic isn't out until probably June or July next year, and who knows if that book might not receive a delay before it actually gets solicited with a release date attached to it. And then the Korra comic is they've basically said more or less like late 2022, so who knows if by the time that one gets solicited, if it's even meant to be in 2023 or not. And there's problems like that, of like Dark Horse don't even have that amazing of a lineup for next year. They only have books really in the early part of the year because books were delayed this year. Like I said, the Chibi comic being an early 2023 release is only because it never came out in 2021. The preview for that book is basically what saved the free comic this year, because they don't seem to know what's going on with the original story they had planned for it. Because again, remember that free comic book day book has a cover with non-Chibi Ang on the cover, yet there's nothing about that on the inside. Like that's what tells you something has gone very wrong with Avatar and Dark Horse this year. And I just hope they can get back on track next year and going forward. We basically know Avatar Studios has been the reason everything's been slow the last couple of years. And hopefully, as we learn more about Avatar Studios and their plan for everything, including publishing can get better. But I will say right now, 2023 is going to absolutely need the second Yang Chen book, because I don't think the comics are going to be enough. I really don't think they're going to be enough. This year was lucky that we had the Yang Chen book, and also you could say the RPG book as well. Because otherwise, like Dark Horse, who have usually been the supplier of most of the new content, have had their far and away, I would say, weakest year for story content. And I think it's crazy that this is year 2, basically, of waiting for Avatar Studios, and they've had an absolute nightmare of a year. And it is unacceptable. Like, it really is. As much as there are reasons like shipping and stuff like that, it shouldn't be the job of fans to have to explain away a year's worth of kind of calamitous behavior with these books. So I'm going to wrap it up there. In terms of upcoming news, I suppose we're expecting the November update for the Kickstarter to come in probably Wednesday. That should be an interesting one in that they have to have more detailed shipping information. Otherwise, I would say we probably are expecting the solicitation for the Azula comic to probably hit before the end of the year. So that could be this month. It could be next month. We'll have to wait and see. But usually that is the way things go. Otherwise, like I don't know if we're really meant to be expecting any Avatar Studios news or even news about the Netflix show. I think as Avatar News mentioned, and I thought was a good post, this is probably an example of things are very slow right now for ATLA, Avatar, because of James Cameron's Avatar, at long last releasing their second movie. And just because it is called Avatar, and especially because their title is basically like an Avatar title, it's called like Way of Water or something like that, they probably don't want to deal with that confusion. And the expectation probably is that, that'll get a bunch of hype for the next couple of months while it's out in the cinemas and fall off like it sort of has in the past. And then maybe Avatar can pick up with the news like early next year, hopefully, because we really need it to. And it's just to highlight that, 2022 has not been a good year for Avatar. Merchandise has been all over the place this year. Outside of the Yang Chen book, you'd say publishing has been all over the place this year. And again, we've got next to no information about any of the other big projects. So where was the huge positivity this year? And especially given that it was the 10-year anniversary for Korra, didn't feel like it. So gonna wrap up the video there. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. The 10th or 11th delay for Patterns in Time, and the confusing thing about it seems like it's a mass market delay, maybe not a comic book store delay, but we don't actually know. Make of that what you will, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.